You'll see cars that hit 300,000 and cars that don't, and it almost never comes down to luck. Today, we're breaking down how to make your Chevy last past 300,000 miles without major repairs. Number 10. Cold starts matter more than you think. Most engine wear doesn't happen at high speed. It happens within the first few seconds after the vehicle is turned on. So why do engines that are driven gently still wear out early? Because cold starts are when engines are least protected. Oil has drained back into the pan, clearances are tight, and metal parts are touching before lubrication fully builds. Letting the engine idle briefly gives oil pressure time to stabilize and coat bearings, cam surfaces, timing components, and cylinder walls. You're not warming the engine for comfort, you're letting friction drop before load is applied. Over tens of thousands of starts, this habit alone reduces scuffing, timing chain wear, and valve train fatigue. The engine warms evenly, sensors settle, and nothing is forced to work before it's ready. It feels insignificant in the moment, but over the years, it isn't. Once the engine is protected at startup, what really determines how long it survives comes down to what's flowing through it. Number 9. Ignore factory oil intervals. Factory service intervals are written to get engines through warranty periods, not lifetime ownership. So what happens when you stop trusting the dashboard reminder? When you stop trusting the dashboard reminder, the oil breaks down long before it stops looking clean. Fuel dilution, heat cycles, moisture, and microscopic metal particles slowly reduce its ability to protect moving parts. Changing oil early keeps contaminants from settling in. Sludge never gets comfortable, and heat breakdown never wins. The bearings, chains, and seals operate in stable conditions instead of constantly compensating. Engines that last past 300,000 don't do it by luck. They do it because oil is always fresh enough to do its job properly. But clean oil won't save an engine if the way power is applied keeps shocking it. Number 8. Progressive throttle, not full sends. Chevy drivetrains are durable, but they still remember how they're treated. Why do some engines feel tired early, even without abuse? Progressive throttle lets power come in naturally instead of all at once. Pistons, rods, and crank journals take the load smoothly, transmissions have time to engage cleanly, and the axles and mounts aren't hit with instant torque spikes. You still get up to speed, and you still use the engine. It's just that you don't shock the system every time you move. Over time, mounts stay tight, gear wear stays even, and drivability stays familiar instead of sloppy. Engines don't just fail from stress, they fail from repeated shock. Even smooth driving can't save a transmission if what's inside it is already cooked. Number 7. Transmission fluid is not lifetime. Lifetime fluid is a marketing phrase, and gearboxes don't agree with it. So why do so many transmissions fail quietly? Transmission fluid does more than lubrication. It cools, cushions, and controls engagement. When it degrades, shifts get inconsistent, heat builds, and internal parts slowly lose protection. Fresh fluid keeps clutches gripping properly and torque converters smooth. Automatics shift predictably. Manuals feel consistent instead of stiff or notchy. Most transmission failures aren't sudden. They're slow declines caused by fluid that stayed too long. Quick pause. If this breakdown is helping you understand your Chevy better, take a second to like the video and subscribe. Most people watching aren't subscribed, and it really helps the channel grow. Alright, back to it. And speaking of heat, this is where most long-term failures actually start. Number 6. Treat cooling like preventive medicine. Heat is the enemy of everything mechanical. Why do engines fail with no warning at all? because heat damage builds quietly. Coolant flushes, healthy hoses, working thermostats, clean radiators. All of it matters more than people realize. Once temperatures creep, oil breaks down faster, seals harden, and gaskets weaken. Engines rarely warn you before heat does real damage. Keeping temperatures boring doesn't feel exciting, but it protects everything surrounding the engine. Long-lasting Chevys are almost always boring from a thermal standpoint. But heat isn't always the cause. Sometimes it's the result of ignored problems.
Up to this point, everything sounds like basic care, nothing extreme or special. But here's the question most people miss. If all of this is so simple, why do so few cars ever make it this far? Number 5. Fix small problems immediately. Cars always warn you before they fail. What separates a cheap fix from a dead engine? Time is the one thing cars don't get back. Small leaks, strange noises, odd sensor behavior. None of these fix themselves. And on modern engines, they almost always trigger a chain reaction. A slightly dirty sensor can throw off fuel delivery, a slow seep can drop oil pressure just enough, and a weak thermostat can let heat creep higher than it should. Ignoring that stuff forces the engine to compensate. Oil levels drop without you noticing. Fuel trims drift as the computer tries to correct bad data, and stress spreads into places that were never the original problem. High-mileage Chevys survive because issues are handled early, while they're still isolated. A sensor gets replaced before it confuses the system. A gasket gets fixed before oil loss affects bearings. A cooling issue gets solved before heat attacks seals and wiring. Catching problems at the source keeps the engine running normally instead of constantly adjusting to survive. And that's what lets everything age slowly instead of all at once. Even with perfect maintenance, engines still need one basic thing to stay healthy. Number 4. Let the engine breathe. When airflow or fluid flow gets restricted, the engine has to work harder, and that extra strain shortens the engine's life. What happens when an engine has to fight just to breathe? Dirty air filters and clogged intake paths force engines to work harder just to breathe, which throws off fuel mixtures and pushes heat where it doesn't belong. Sensors start compensating, throttle response dulls, and efficiency slowly drops. Keeping the intake clean lets air move freely, helps the ECU make accurate adjustments, stabilizes combustion, and reduces long-term stress on valves, pistons, and catalytic components. Over time, this also helps it to maintain consistent power delivery, prevents carbon buildup, and keeps the engine feeling responsive instead of strained as the miles add up. And that brings us to something most owners never think about at all. Number 3. Fuel quality and tank discipline. Fuel habits shape how an engine ages. Why do some injectors fail early while others never do? Consistent fuel quality keeps injectors clean and combustion stable, while avoiding near-empty tanks helps the fuel pump stay submerged and cool instead of overheating and pulling debris from the bottom of the tank. That steady supply means injectors spray evenly, knock control doesn't have to intervene as often, and ignition timing stays closer to ideal. Over time, carbon buildup slows down, fuel trims remain predictable, and the engine isn't constantly correcting itself just to stay smooth. Cold starts feel easier, idle stays steady, and throttle response doesn't fade with age. The payoff is long-term health for the pump, injectors, valves, and sensors. Nothing dramatic happens. The engine simply keeps doing its job without extra stress, mile after mile. There's also less strain on supporting parts. Oxygen sensors don't get coated as quickly. Catalytic converters aren't dealing with unburned fuel. The payoff is long-term health for the pump, injectors, valves, and sensors. Nothing dramatic happens.
The engine simply keeps doing its job without extra stress, mile after mile. But longevity isn't just about what you do. It's also about what the car does for you. And here's where it shifts. Because even owners who do everything right still lose cars early. Which brings up the uncomfortable question. How much of longevity comes from the driver, and how much comes from the car itself? Number 2. Let Chevy's built-in protection do its job. Chevy programs systems to degrade instead of fail. Why does a Chevy still feel drivable when something isn't perfect? Because Chevrolet designs its systems to fail gently instead of all at once. When something isn't perfect, the car just adjusts. Power steering gets heavier instead of disappearing. Cooling fans jump to full blast instead of shutting down, and throttle response softens instead of cutting power without warning. Each of these choices is meant to keep the driver in control while reducing stress on mechanical parts. When steering assist fades gradually, you can still guide the car safely instead of fighting it. When fans go max, heat is pulled out before oil, seals, and sensors start suffering. When throttle input is smoothed, the engine and transmission aren't shocked at the worst possible moment. These fallback behaviors also prevent chain reactions. One small fault doesn't immediately overload another system. Temperatures stabilize, pressures stay reasonable, and components aren't forced to operate outside their comfort zone. The car gives you time to react, time to slow down, and time to fix the issue properly instead of compounding it. Chevys last because they're designed to absorb human error. Missed maintenance, bad traffic, rushed driving, small mistakes, the systems step in, soften the blow, and keep things alive long enough for the car to survive it. And when you step back and look at all of this together, one pattern becomes obvious. Number 1. Consistency beats everything. No single habit takes a Chevy to 300,000. So what actually keeps one alive that long? Because longevity isn't built on one big decision, it's built on patterns repeated every day. What keeps a Chevy alive past 300,000 miles is consistency in how it's driven, maintained, and corrected when something feels off. That's where calm starts matter. Clean fluids do their job properly, and smooth inputs keep stress from piling up where you can't see it. Early fixes stop small issues from spreading into expensive ones, and stable temperatures prevent seals, gaskets, and electronics from aging faster than they should. None of this feels exciting, but all of it reduces wear that usually goes unnoticed until it's too late. Chevrolets don't need to be babied. They need to be respected and treated like machines that respond well to steady habits. When you drive them smoothly, service them before they're desperate, and don't ignore early warnings, the systems stay in balance instead of constantly compensating. Do this long enough, and the car doesn't feel worn out at 300,000. It feels familiar, predictable, like something that's been working with you for years instead of fighting to survive. Making a Chevy last over 300,000 miles, you'll see cars that hit 300,000 and cars that don't, and it almost never comes down to luck. Today, we're breaking down how to make your Chevy last past 300,000 miles without major repairs. Number 10. Cold starts matter more than you think. Most engine wear doesn't happen at high speed. It happens within the first few seconds after the vehicle is turned on.